Hello, everyone. This is Brian Berry from ScanForce. Welcome in. I am joined by my good friend Simon Quinn from over at CertiPro. And today we're going to be talking about the physical count, physical inventory side of things in Sage 100. Simon and I were chatting the other day, and we were just talking about what they do, what we do, their automated inventory cycle count, and then what we do on the physical count side. And we thought it's such a great marriage between the two. We should do a joint webinar and tell everybody about how they can automate this from end to end. So here we are today. So certainly what CertiPro does is helping you define the things that you should count. And then on the ScanForce side, once you've decided what you need to count, ScanForce helps you physically make that happen out in the warehouse. So it really is a great synergy, a perfect marriage of two different solutions. So that's why we came together today to present this to you. So before we get started, real quick housekeeping. Number one, everybody's muted as you would expect. But we do want to hear from you. So there is both a chat and a questions function. You probably see that little buttons up at the top of your screen. We want to hear from you. Please input your questions or comments there. Our marketing guru, Woody, is monitoring all of those. And at the very end, he's going to read off these questions, and Simon and I will fire off answers for those and get all your questions resolved that way. Okay. Also, everybody that registered will be getting a link via email in a day or so, once we have a chance to polish this and get it published out there. And you'll be able to share this internally with others in your organization, or re-watch something to drive a point home or something of that nature. And of course, Simon and I are always available to take individual calls, questions about this after the fact. If you'd like to set up a personal demo for you and or your team, contact us individually and we can talk to you about our respective portions. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rolling. I'll turn things over to Simon to talk about AICC.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate the intro. Great overview. So I'm here to talk about our automated inventory cycle count for Sage. We know that using cycle counting to maintain high levels of accuracy is one of the best ways to identify problem areas, if you will. Every business unit within the company should understand that its impact on inventory accuracy matters, a lot. So, and many companies, I feel, overlook the simple truth that managing inventory accuracy effectively is key to business success. So obviously, you're going to have to count inventory to determine the accuracy, as well as determining areas of need that need additional evaluation. Now, I'm not knocking any of you accountants that might be out there, but year-end physical inventories are tools that are used by accountants, but basically do very little for inventory accuracy. So by performing regular cycle counts, you give yourself an opportunity to compare quantities in Sage to the quantities that are actually counted. And this variance is a powerful opportunity to identify where your inventory system is working well, where there's little variance, and where you may have a control issue that needs to be tightened up. So if you notice that your numbers are way off, you now have an opportunity to find out why the problem is happening. So keep in mind, using regular cycle counts allows you to take corrective action more frequently. So for example, if you perform monthly cycle counts, you have 12 opportunities to fix problems versus 1 when you're just doing your annual physical inventory count. So our AICC software is going to configure and set up an automatic count for you and handle all of this the counting process for you as far as generating the counts. So, another important difference between cycle counting and taking physical inventory annually, by having your warehouse staff perform cycle counts of segments of your inventory regularly, you negate the need for really shutting down your operations for a weekend or a period of time just to make sure that your numbers are correct. So of course, and we all know, closing down your business for any period of time can be costly, and you're dealing with, sometimes paying your employees overtime to perform the physical count, and all of this can add up. So this is why we've created our inventory cycle count, our automated inventory cycle count, to help you eliminate all of this. You can really imagine your day-to-day work and life being made easier by being better organized with a clearly defined logic to managing your inventory planning process. So with that, I'm going to move to Sage. And you'll see that here we have our software installed under physical counts. It's under inventory management, physical count, and down the bottom here, once you acquire the software, you'll have CPS inventory cycle count history, which I have opened here. So this program is a single screen user interface. It's very simple to use, very simple to manage. So the warehouse here is identified by a numeric warehouse code, as many of you all know. If you have multiple warehouses, you can scroll through the warehouse codes with these arrows. And each warehouse is going to have its own schedule. You can configure what time you want to generate the cycle count per warehouse, and you can set up automatic email notifications by warehouse only. So we've selected this warehouse 000, and these 3 grids have populated. So the top grid is basically the filtering section. The middle grid will represent the filtering choices and shows you what you have assigned into the cycle count intervals. And below here is the summary based on your setup. So however you want to configure it, it's going to show how many items per day is going to be counting. So if I go through the filters here, like click on all evaluations, whatever that subcategory is, you'll see that the middle grid updates automatically based on my choices. So this is all product types, all procurement, and you can filter that as needed any way you want to go. So you can also drill down a little further. So let's say I want to take a look at standard unit price. Let's go greater than $1,000. And I'll hit that. And you'll see now the items have populated to the specific sets of items that you want to look at. So now here we can go ahead and create the update. So I already have the items, as I said, showing greater than $1,000. And I want to assign them now to an inventory cycle category and define how many times I want them to be counted. So, but before I jump into showing you that, I want to cover some of these abbreviations and what that means. So YCC, pretty self-explanatory, yearly cycle counts. So upon implementation, or when you add an item, it's going to have a value of -1, which means that you have not touched those items yet. So when you move it to 0, it means that you have added an item to be inventoried and to be counted. So you see I have these at 12, but you can have a number from 1 to 52, meaning that you can assign an item to be counted once a week, once a month, or whatever interval you really want to count. And the update's pretty simple. So I have these selected here. I can click the corner to select them all. That check mark does them, selects them all. I can come down here and set up the yearly cycle count. Let's just say I want to do 6. And so then it'll count that category that way. I'm going to bring it back to 12. Select those, bring it back to 12 and assign that. So then that goes up. So that's pretty straightforward. Here, if you're working with multiple line items, like I'm sure that a number of warehouses have, many items over $1,000, and there's a lot to handle. You can right click. I don't have Excel set up on this demo server, but you can right click here on this grid and export this list out to Excel and do your updates there, and then export them back in. So it makes it very simple to manage, very easy to handle. So for the remaining counts, it's another powerful tool that allows you to set up items where, let's say they're going to be discontinued, right? We know that some items are not going to be in your inventory perpetually. So this basically allows you to define how many more times you want that item to be counted. So it's going to automatically fall off the cycle count process once the YCC, it'll automatically set that to 0 and fall off. So the summary count down here, the section, the bottom of the screen, it really displays based on the setup, as I said earlier, how many items I need to count each day so I can see what the actual count number is. So going back and forth, you can manage that as needed. For FCNT, which is force count next time, FCAT, which is force count all the time, and then for hold. So for hold, we know that in every warehouse, there's going to be scenarios where you pull certain items temporarily to hold, and you don't want those items to be included in the count until the item is released back into inventory. And there could be many reasons for that, but that's how you would manage that situation. For force count next time, if you find a discrepancy and you want it to be resolved ASAP, the item in question might be scheduled for a count, let's say 2 weeks or 2 months from now, and you don't want to wait. So by checking this box, when you generate the cycle count, the item is actually going to be included. So for scheduling, at the top here of the screen, we have the option to schedule the cycle count automatically. And here you can see we're simply using the task scheduler from Sage 100. And here you can schedule the days of the week that you want to have to run the actual cycle count itself. Active Warehouse will put, if you have multiple warehouses going on, this is where you can manage that process. It shows you all the active warehouses and allows you to manage them, either to have them enabled or not. With options, there's a lot of options here within the options screen. So a number of them are, the rollover of the yearly cycle count from large to small. It's a very helpful option for working with A, B, C item ranking. So once all of the A items have been counted, it's automatically going to start to pull from the B category to maintain the same number of items to be counted per day per that example. There can be exception days set up. Here, actually, let me just add this. Here you can put email address for whoever should be notified in your warehouse. Once a count is generated, they will get an email that is sent to them with an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file once that is sent out. And this is where you would put those employees or whoever wants to receive that list of the count once it's actually created. The exception days are basically days where allows you to enter days when the cycle count should be skipped. So these could be holidays, these can be vacation days, and the holiday type is going to apply to all warehouses, and the vacation type will apply to a single warehouse. This is configured for automatic generation, but at any given point, you also have an option to do a manual count. So, but for demo purposes, I've already created that. So once you have a count created, let's just take a look real quick at the spreadsheet that is sent. As I said earlier, this is what's contained in that spreadsheet. And this is configurable based on what you want those individuals to see. So if you're using, and Brian's going to cover this in a little more detail, if you're using a scanner, you can quickly go and go and verify all of the counts and perform these updates in Sage directly. Brian will cover that separately. So I'm going to go to the physical count entry program, which I've already pulled. And if we go to the lines, and I have 100 already, 000 already brought up, you can see that here's the 4 items that need to be counted today. So in the options, I've set it for the quantity on hand, but this is where you can edit what is seen on that. And again, this will be pushed out to the scanners that Brian's going to cover later. And once that cycle count has been run, you obviously want to know what the results are going to be, which we have here. So for this reason, once we want to, we want to know what's going on with the actual run. We want to know how accurate is the inventory. So we've created an explorer called CPS Inventory Cycle Count History. And this is the place where you're going to find all of the items that not only have a discrepancy, but also all of the items that you've counted throughout the year that have been accurate. You can open it up and you'll see the detail there. You can look into how many items are being counted each day, what was the counted quantity, and any additional info. So for those users that are familiar with Explorer, you can drag and drop these fields. You can use these filters to analyze the data. And you can also obviously export this to Excel. So as you click through any of the items on the bottom of the screen, it's going to tell you how many adjustments were done to the specific lots. And you can also track all the cycle count history for all items in all warehouses. So it shows the quantity cost, the unit cost, and the extended amount. So there's end users, there's customers that use this as a bankable document for auditors. And it's really a great representation of what is truly in your inventory. So with that, I'm going to transition. We're going to transition over to Brian, and he's going to show you what ScanForce can do with these tools. Over to you, Brian.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Simon. Okay, so as Simon had said, what you saw before is sort of the brains of it. It tells you what to do, what to count, and what frequency, that sort of thing. Think of ScanForce then as the brawn, so the brains and the brawn. We help you physically make that happen out in the warehouse. And don't think I'm slighted by referring to Simon as the smart guy here. So while he got the brains, I got the looks, so it works out okay for both of us. But again, my name is Brian Berry. I head up the One Tender team here at ScanForce. So I'm your liaison for anything related to ScanForce, be it functionality questions, pricing, demonstrations. Bring any and all of that to me, and I'll be happy to help you out. Okay. Just a quick introduction to us as a company. I won't bother reading this screen to you, but we've been around for over 20 years. We've got over 10,000 users in the Sage 100 world. We grew out of a Sage 100 client that wanted to scan barcodes. So that's really how we got our birth. And a real quick recap as to exactly what ScanForce is, what we do. First of all, we have a WMS. That's a warehouse management system. Big term for barcoding system. We have 3 different versions or editions that have different levels of features. Of course, we do label printing. We're a barcoding company. We'd be stuck in the mud if we couldn't print labels at all these different times. We can handle manufacturing functions as well. So whatever you're doing, whether it's bill of materials, production management, or even legacy stuff in Sage 100, we can handle that. We also have a mobile sales piece, which is completely different. It's not something we're going to focus on today, but if you ever need to take orders in a mobile setting, be it at a trade show, or if you visit customers in their facility, or even if you just have a will call counter and you want to be mobile and move around, that's really what our mobile sales piece does, okay? But let's dive in and talk about the meat of it, talk about physical count, okay? A couple things to take note of. Some of the stuff that Simon was talking about was like freezing items in Sage. Let me expand on that, make sure everybody's on the same page there when we talk about freezing. Some people have the misconception that when we say freeze, big air quotes there, that we're actually locking things down and nothing can happen to it. That's actually not the case. In fact, Simon and I were talking about this, joking around about it the other day. We were prepping for this. It's a horrible term that's used in Sage. It's really not frozen at all, because even once you freeze it in Sage, you could still receive against that item code and ship against that item code. Nothing is locked down or frozen. It's just the term Sage uses to take a snapshot in time of what your inventory was like at that exact instant. Okay, when it is quote frozen, we just take a snapshot in time. Okay, so that's something to just to kind of keep in mind as we're going through this. All right, so doing a physical count, obviously you're sending people out there into the warehouse to count what you've got, all of your stuff. Okay, now ScanForce allows you to do this across all of those 3 functional versions, the core, the select, and the premier that I showed you a moment ago. It's out of the box, it's included to do physical count, and always has been. Okay, so that's the out of the box solution. But we do have an add-on, which is an enhancement that can be added to this, called directed physical count. And I'm going to talk about both of those options today that we can use in conjunction with what CertiPro does. Okay, so let me jump on and talk about the directed side of things first. One of the great things about directed physical count is it allows you to eliminate paper. And that's one of the main goals that people have when they come to me and they say, Brian, I think we need to grow up a little bit, get ourselves into the big leagues in our warehouse, put some emphasis on our operations. We just got way too much paper. We're drowning in paper. People write things down. Who knows what they write? 4s look like 9. Our inventory's off by 5. A piece of paper fell behind the desk. I'm preaching to the choir. You know what I'm talking about. Well, we eliminate the need for paper altogether with this directed physical count add-on. Okay, so what works is you would freeze, and we just talked about what freezing means. You would freeze items to be counted. Now, if you have Simon CertiPro, it tells you what to do. It freezes them for you, and they're there in Sage, and that transmits to our scanner, and that gives the users a to-do list of exactly what they need to count. If you don't have CertiPro, this still works with ScanForce as a standalone, and you would go in and you would manually freeze items. The benefit of CertiPro, obviously everything that Simon just told you about, the frequencies and ABC items and all that good stuff, okay? So they're visible on the scanner. And if you are using the multi-bin version of our solution, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we go, you can actually break things into zones, and you can have individuals responsible for areas or zones of the warehouse, and they would count the items that are in their area. Other items that are in different areas or zones get counted by somebody else. That's not a gotta have, but it's something you can do. It's a feature that's available. And one of the best parts about this, again, is it's instantly transmitted back to Sage. You don't have to turn in paper and wait for people to interpret it, because there's a time lag between when you write it down and who knows if they wrote it down correctly. Again, 4s sometimes look like 9s. And then there's the time lag, and sometimes the paper falls behind a desk. And the person in the office that takes that piece of paper, maybe they read it wrong, or maybe they key it in wrong. There's all these potential error points that can cause physical counts to be inaccurate, when in reality, the purpose of a physical count is to add accuracy to your inventory. So the process itself, when done on paper, is just fraught with potential error points. And ScanForce, doing it electronically through mobile scanners, we eliminated those, okay? So let's jump in and take a look at what this looks like on some of the screens. On the left, I'm going to show you our normal out-of-the-box physical count that comes with all the versions of our software. And then on the right, I will show you the difference if we add the enhancement called directed physical count. So you'll see them side by side and determine which one of them really makes the most sense for you. So first off, if you're doing a physical count, you would go into the physical count application in ScanForce, and it would ask you to identify the item that you're counting. You would scan that item or select it from a list. That's what this little search button does over here. Once you identify the item, then it asks you, how many do you have? And so that's really simple. What's the item? How many you got? That's exactly what you would think physical count does. Now, there's some nuances here. Let me talk about some of those. First of all, you'll notice that I'm displaying right here what the on-hand quantity is. There should be 1,025 of these out there. Some people get really mad when I show them this. They say, Brian, that's stupid. Why would you tell them how many are supposed to be there? We've got this one guy, Bubba, out in the warehouse. He's so lazy, he's just going to type in 1,025, because if he knows if he types anything different, we're going to make him go back and recount it again. Okay? I hear you. Most people want a blind count. This is really simple. There's a setting behind the scenes in ScanForce. It's a simple little yes/no flag that turns that field on and off. I would say 80 to 90% of people keep it turned off. But ScanForce, very settings-driven system, some of our customers really like that feature because they want to show people what the target is. There should be 1,025. If you only find 800, you need to keep looking. So some people really like that. So it's a very flexible system. You can choose to turn that kind of thing on and off. Also, we can display the location. Even if it's a non-multi-bin environment, which this is, I'm showing you non-multi-bin first. If you have the single location where you stock those set up in Sage, we can display that here for you. Again, you don't have to do that, but if you have it set up in Sage, we'll pull it forward automatically and display it for you. Back over here, this auto increment feature, in case you're wondering what that is, that's a checkbox that you can toggle off and on. And when you turn it on, what it does is it turns the scanner into a counter. You know, if you go to the grocery store, if you scan multiple items, every time you hear the beep, it just increments the count up by 1. Well, that's what our auto increment feature does. Every time you scan it, it automatically increments the count by 1. Okay, so if I have 3 things, I could just go beep, 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 and move on. I don't even know what they need to know what they are. The scanner, the barcode, they know what it is. And by virtue of scanning 3 of them, we count 3, return that back to Sage. If I don't turn that on, then I get the quantity field over here. If I have this turned on, you never even see this screen. It just says keep scanning items and I'll keep counting. Okay, so I'll be happy to describe that with you and help you interpret whether or not that would work in your environment on a one-on-one basis. Okay, so this is how it works out of the box. We've been doing this for a long, long time. Let's look at what happens if we add the directed physical count enhancement. First of all, that first screen looks a little different. It looks like this out of the box, but with directed physical count, now under the directed box, I see I've got 3 items I need to count. So what happens is CertiPro has determined these are the 3 items that I need to count today. They got frozen in Sage. They show up automatically on my screen here as a to-do list. And again, if you have the locations saved in Sage where you store these items, it will display them, making it that much faster and easier and efficient for your workers to go get them. In other words, they don't have to walk around and hunt for these items. They just go to location A110 and they find orange widgets. They go to A220 and they find gray widgets and so on. So this gives you a list of things to do. Another thing to notice is it's A110, then the A200s, but it's A220 first and then A270. It actually puts them in the sequence of counting that's the most efficient. It's doing it an alphanumeric search based on the location. So if I had something that was not in aisle A, that would be at the bottom of the list. So it would tell me to count all the items in aisle A first and then move on. So that way we walk a serpentine path through our warehouse and we've got everything counted and we don't have to crisscross back and forth. Okay, so once we scan one of those items, it then asks me for the quantity screen. And just like before, we don't have to show the on hand. You could use the auto increment feature, just like we talked about back here. So these are the 2 versions. This is the out of the box version, where you just go to a location, scan an item and start counting. The directed, that dovetails very nicely with CertiPro, tells me exactly what to count and in which order, because CertiPro throws it and it feeds directly into my scanner. Okay, so this is all in a non-multi-bin environment. Now, again, we can display the singular bin in Sage if you have that set up in item maintenance, but you don't have to. Now, let's look at the flip side of the coin. What if we have multi-bin? Well, once you have multi-bin, we can do a lot of other cool things. And the first one is you can count in zones. And by that, I mean, if you've got 3 people out there that are responsible for counting, and I'm responsible for this area, somebody else for the next area, somebody else for a third area, I can enter a start and ending location, and it will give me a truncated list of those frozen items in that directed physical count that I need to count or that I'm responsible for. So if the same item is in more than one place, if one of those places are in my zone, 2 of them are in somebody else's zone, I'm going to see mine, they will see 2 in theirs to count. And then they all roll up back in Sage. Now, you don't have to use this part, but it is, again, a feature that you can use if you have a large, complex warehouse and you have multiple people working in there and you want to get your counts done really quickly. Okay, so whether or not you do that, this is the list that you're going to get of the locations that you need to visit. Okay, now in non-multi-bin, we jumped right to the item and we started scanning the item. But in multi-bin, that item could exist in more than one place. For instance, in this case, CertiPro said you need to count item 1905. That's a white widget. But you'll see it's listed multiple times because it's in at least 4 different locations. I've got a scroll bar here. It may be even in more if I kept scrolling, but at least there's 4 locations where I need to go to count 1905. So you'll notice I count aisle A first, then aisle D, then aisle E. That's the directed part of this, making it efficient so I can walk that serpentine path through the warehouse and collect the data very efficiently. So I would go to A110, scan the sticker, the placard, the barcode that is at that location that identifies where I am, and that would populate here and advance me onto the next screen where I would then identify the item. Now, in this case, there's only 1 item to be counted in that location, but there could be multiples. So it would list multiple items in that location. So I would then scan the item, and it would verify that I've got the right item. And at any point in time, if you scan the wrong location or the wrong item, it's going to give you instant feedback to say, nope, that's not the right location, Brian, or nope, that's not the right item, Brian. And it tells you if you've made a careless mistake so you don't accidentally submit bad data. And then just like we saw on the previous screens, it's going to ask for the quantity. And again, you can use the auto increment feature here if you wish. And if you don't like that feature at all, guess what? There's a setting behind the scenes that turns that off. So it just won't appear for your workers. Okay. Also, like we talked about before, we can hide the on-hand quantity. Okay. So that's really 3 different versions of this scenario that I've explained to you. 2 of them were in non-multi-bin. what you get out of the box, and what you get if you add the directed physical count enhancement. And then here on this screen, we've talked about in a multi-bin environment, what the directed physical count would look like, okay? Now, there is a fourth. That's if you have multi-bin, but you don't have the enhancement, but that's essentially very similar to what you're seeing here, so I didn't bother showing you another set of slides. So if we've given you too much information and your head's swimming a little bit and you're not exactly sure which of these versions makes the most sense for you, that's when I would like to have a personal one-on-one conversation with you and talk about that, okay? So my contact information is up here, okay? Now, I didn't include my email address. I have info@ScanForce because that goes to my whole team. Because my job, I do a lot of demos throughout the day, so I don't want you to have to wait on me if I've got back-to-back-to-back demos and wait a half a day. If you send an email to info, somebody on our team will get back to you right away, okay? All right, so let's do this. Let's go turn things back over to our marketing guru, Woody, who has been monitoring the chat and the questions. And let's see what kind of questions or comments you folks have come up with for either myself or Simon. If you haven't entered them yet, please enter them now, and we'll get all those answered for you. So, Woody, take it over.
Thank you, Brian. Wanted to start off with Jose's question here first. My scan gun goes to location, not the item. I don't know if that's enough information for you guys to go off of at this point, or Jose, maybe you could be a little bit more specific in the with a follow-up here about what.
So Jose, there are some settings within ScanForce that determine the order of events, the sequence of which things are handled, whether we identify location and then item, or item and then location. So that's certainly a conversation that we can have. Please ping an email to info@ScanForce, and somebody will get back with you right away, and we'll talk through what your options are there. It may be that there's a setting change that we can make that would make this better for you. So by all means, let's have the conversation.
All right, next question. If you are not performing cycle counts, would it be better to run a physical inventory first?
So yeah, you certainly can count the entire warehouse at one time rather than a cycle count, okay? In that instance, at least from the ScanForce perspective, if you're counting everything, you don't need to pre-freeze anything. You just go out there and start counting, okay? And that's absolutely something that our customers do all the time, okay? It's like that full sort of year-end inventory or every 6 months or something like that. That happens a lot. We focus today more on the cycle counting thing because that's more of the CertiPro tie-in. But yes, from the ScanForce perspective, you certainly could just go start at the left-hand side of the warehouse and work your way across to the right. And if you have any questions about the best ways to do that, again, ping us and let us know.
Next question. Do we have to assign count times to every item or assign a count time to the ABC code?
It's going to be at the line item, the actual item code itself. So you're going to be assigning a counting interval to the actual item code directly. And within that, you will define whether it's an A, B, C, or D item if you go that far. So the actual count time is going to be on the item line, the line item level.
All right, you guys had talked about the term frozen earlier. Next question is, how is the inventory frozen? Via CertiPro or a ScanForce function, and what determines what items are frozen?
Yeah, so Simon, I'll let you take your part of that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian touched on it during his discussion, his overview as well. It's really that frozen piece of it that Sage uses is not, it's not very true. I mean, Sage, it says it freezes an item, but it actually doesn't. I mean, the key here is really to get the count of what's been counted and what is actually on hand. So as far as the frozen piece of it, I'll let Brian expand upon that a little bit more.
Sure. So from the ScanForce perspective, you do not have to have any items frozen in Sage when you do your counts. You can just hand a scanner to somebody and you can say, start at aisle A and count the left-hand side today. And tomorrow we're going to count the right-hand side. And on Wednesday, we're going to move over to aisle B. Okay. So what happens is in ScanForce, when you scan the item and you send that back to Sage, ScanForce will freeze it for you. Now, what I mean by freeze, is not lock it down so nothing can happen in that item code. So you could still receive and ship against it even after it's, quote, frozen. But what it does, it takes that snapshot in time to say, what does Sage say is there? And then we compare that to the physical count that ScanForce returns back. And that's when you run the reconciliation report in Sage and you compare the differences and decide whether you write off the difference or whether you resubmit to be recounted again or something of that nature. Okay, so the freezing could happen because CertiPro's logic says it is time to count this item or this subset of items, and it freezes them. And then our enhancement, directed physical count, sees that and we execute it. Or you could manually go into Sage and you could, quote, freeze those items, take a snapshot in time, and then we could go count those on the handhelds. Or with ScanForce, you could just go scan stuff, and when you send it back, we'll freeze the ones that you counted. And we see that happen a lot with, especially like if you're getting ready to make a big purchase, you got a big PO that you're ready to cut a check for. And maybe especially for people that are buying things from China, and it's going to take a month for a container to get here, and you can't screw up the PO. It's got to be right because of the time lag. So they might grab a scanner, somebody in purchasing, run outside, do a quick cycle count, and then by the time they get back to their desk, there's all the data in the physical count entry. Okay, and you can compare what Sage says is there and what you physically found and make a decision on what you buy. Okay, so the timing of the freeze and who does it could be CertiPro, it could be manual, or it could be ScanForce doing it automatic for you. So if you have any other questions, then please let us know. Be happy to have a conversation, talk about your unique situation.
Yeah, and I want to just add to that because it's very common where during the count process, an item doesn't get counted, right? And you don't want to freeze that item because it didn't get counted. Some employee may have missed it. Many reasons why it did not happen. So what happens is when the next cycle count is run again, when it's generated, that missed item is going to show up on the next count, and it's going to be noted that this was missed. So it's not freezing the inventory. It allows orders to be placed against it. It'll just show up again on the physical count inventory as a line item that item was missed. So that's important to differentiate.
Next question. Where do I assign an aisle to be scanned on Sage?
So if you're using our multi-bin version of ScanForce, you on that first screen, if you're using our directed physical count enhancement, the very first screen has a starting and ending point. So you could go in there and you could define the first shelf or bin location on an aisle, and then the last shelf or bin location on another aisle. And then everything in between there would be that person's responsibility. So call that zone 1. And then somebody else picks up and they do the same thing in zone 2 and define zone 3. And it may be as simple as this building versus that building. Or it could be the finished goods part of the warehouse versus the spare parts part of the warehouse. Or it could be the first 3 aisles and the second 3 aisles and the third 3 aisles. So you can define what you want those zones to be, and it can be different every time. If you've got a lot of items to count, maybe you divide it into more zones. If you have a smaller set of items to count, maybe one person does the whole thing, or you only divide it into 2 or 3 zones. So you have a lot of flexibility there.
Next question. Can the item count items be uploaded through a VI job?
That's really more of a Sage question because ScanForce is going to take them once they're frozen. So I would refer you to your Sage consultant to talk about that kind of thing. I wouldn't want to step on toes and give you bad information.
I agree.
All right. Next question. For the cycle count feature, how does it determine what needs to be cycle counted?
That's defined by the initial setup. So once you have your list of items that are imported, it will require you to, as I've noted on the demo, a -1, it's going to have a status of -1, which means that item has not yet been touched. It's waiting to get direction as to how you want to configure it for the cycle counts. Once it's moved to 0, that means that it's actually set up to be configured. Then you can start to assign a number to each item number based on however you want to configure it. So that is user defined based on how many items you want to count per day, based on the ranking of the item, A, B, C, or D, and just based on whatever internal business process that you have. So that's completely set up by you, and it's configurable throughout the whole process. So if you have an item that's being counted once a week, but you want it done once a month because of the inventory or because you can change that on the fly. So it's highly configurable, but it's defined by the end user, by the actual warehouse itself.
Next question, does it automatically unfreeze after they do the count?
So there is a process to unfreeze within Sage's physical count process. There is a button that you can hit that essentially unfreezes things. So from again, the ScanForce perspective, we're physically doing things in the warehouse and sending the data back to Sage. Once it's in Sage, your normal Sage processes take over, okay? So if you have some sort of automated processes today and you're wondering how that might work, it's probably a conversation with your Sage consultant to talk about any sort of nuance that you may have added to the process over time. So again, I hate to sound like I'm passing the buck, but some things are Sage centric and some are warehouse centric, and that's really where I live, and I don't want to give you bad information.
Next question, if we just scan using physical count, once complete and processed on physical variance register, does the inventory get adjusted to what is actually on hand, or is that a manual entry on Sage?
Yeah, again, that happens in Sage, but yes, you're on the right track. Yes, that's the way it works. And if you need some expertise there, your Sage consultant would be the right person, because again, what we're doing is we're providing the count to come back to Sage. ScanForce is the mobile data collection side of this. And then once it's back in Sage, then your Sage processes take over.
Next question, who creates the Sage import?
So from the ScanForce side, we have an import utility that runs in the background. And it's like the traffic cop that controls the data flowing back and forth between Sage and our handhelds. So when you hit send after you've collected your counts, it's just automatically deposited in physical count entry. You're just going to see there, and it's virtually instantaneous, as fast as it can. The ones and zeros can fly over the Wi-Fi. If you did a physical count in the warehouse, it would be there long before you could get back to your desk. It's an instantaneous thing.
And that's the bonus of using ScanForce for this process, is exactly that. While we generate the counts, if you don't have a ScanForce, the tools in place to use scanners and do that process, while we're generating the counts, you're going to be doing a manual paper count off of a spreadsheet or whatever it might be, and then coming back and entering in those numbers manually. So that's really the benefit of using ScanForce for that process. One of many.
Next question, does the cycle count fix the inventory once completed, or do you still need to make the adjustment in Sage?
Yeah, so ScanForce is going to return the actual account. At that point, you would run the reconciliation report and then make a business decision. Is this within our tolerance or is it outside? Do we need to recount or whatever? So that would happen inside Sage after ScanForce returns its count.
Here's a question. How do I know if I already have directed physical count if I'm a ScanForce user?
By all means, just give us a call and we can look and see if that's something that you've purchased and added. It is an enhancement that would be a purchased item. It would not come with the base product, so it would be something that you would have purchased from us at some point. But yeah, if you just give us a call, anybody can look up in your account and tell you exactly which components you have. And if it's something you're interested in, be happy to get you a quote.
Do I have to have CertiPro to use ScanForce's directed physical count?
No, they are separate. Obviously, today you've seen the synergies between the two, but they are two separate entities. The difference is if you don't have CertiPro, one of the requirements to make all of this directed stuff flow to the handheld is the items have to be frozen in Sage. So CertiPro does that for you based on the setup that Simon showed you. Or if you don't have that, you would manually go into Sage and you would freeze an item or subset of items, and then that would flow down to the scanners.
Question here about multi-bin. Do I have to have multi-bin to use the directed count?
No, you do not. Nope. The difference is if you don't have multi-bin, in theory, you're only counting in one place. So it's a much simpler process. If you have multi-bin, then you can do the zones and that sort of thing that we described, but it works equally as well without multi-bin.
Next question, how many different types of cycle counts can run?
I would need more direction on what that question is. If you have multiple warehouses, you can run those individually by warehouse. If there is, it's defined by time. I mean, going back to the previous question, and maybe this one also, the reason why AICC exists was that there was a gap within Sage for the physical count process. Generating an automated generated count just did not exist. So that manual process that Brian had referred to, it's pretty intensive. I mean, especially if you're managing a large number of items in multiple warehouses, trying to manage that physical count process is daunting. So once you get the initial setup and everything configured, and you assign a inventory cycle count to those line items, it's automatic and it just repeats based on what you have configured. And that's the beauty of it. That's what takes all the effort of the manual process out of it. And again, if you can go in, if you find discrepancies and you need to generate counts on a single item or multiple items because they're way off for whatever reason, and you need to see these counts happening daily, you can configure that too. So it really just takes the guesswork out of having to go into Sage and manually set up these physical counts to send to ScanForce, for example.
It looks like you did follow up with if I wanted to do a cycle count for a different type of product each day.
Absolutely, that's configurable on the setup. There's filters that I had shown based on valuations, procurement, based on cost. There's sub-filters. We've broken down all of those, and you can break down those list of items however you want to filter them, and then assign whatever you need to those individual line items that you've selected.
All right, and I think we're going to close with two questions that seem to go together. How difficult is it to add these features to Sage, and how much does this extra does this cost to add to the program?
I'll touch on CertiPro side of things. The configuration and the setup's pretty straightforward. There's two paths to that. We can work with your Sage partner to manage the process. We would just get with them and show them how to do the actual install. It's pretty quick to configure. We would provide all of the training for both the partner and for the customer. And we would do a session to train them. As far as pricing, it's varied on number of warehouses. So I would need to learn more to be able to quote that. But feel free to contact me and I'll put a quote together for you or your partner, and we can show you that. It's pretty straightforward. It's based on number of warehouses, but the implementation and the configuration and the training are something that we will manage with you and your partner and make sure you get set up. It's pretty straightforward.
And from the ScanForce side, very simple to implement. It's going to depend a little depending on if you have the multi-bin version or the non-multi-bin version, because I showed you the different sets of screens. So the training on it is a little different. The setup's a little different depending on what you've got. But if you give us a call and tell us you're interested, we'll return a quote to you same day, very quickly. And the implementation is really pretty quick because we're not reinventing the wheel on how we conduct physical counts. if you're conducting physical counts today in ScanForce and you're curious about adding the directed thing, it really just tweaks one of the screens. It's not going to make a wholesale change to how you're doing it. Okay, so the process your people go through, it's going to be almost the same. We're just adding another layer to it. Okay, so the training and stuff, that's going to be really simple. So give us a ring. We'll get you a quote same day and tell you exactly what it's going to cost and what it would take.
And I believe that's all the questions we have. Thank you, Brian and Simon.
Great. Thanks to everybody. Appreciate you joining in. Hopefully you found the synergies between the two offerings. And, as I mentioned before, please give Simon or I a call, and we'll be happy to discuss this and demo it for you and your team individually. And you can ask as many what-if questions about all the uniqueness in your environment, and we'll get those answered for you. So thanks, everybody, for joining.
Take care. Bye-bye.